Okay, now I'm going to go through the advantages and disadvantages of feudalism. Okay, the advantages and disadvantages of feudalism by Alex Sayez. Feudalism played a major role in the Middle Ages. It drew a clear line separating the different social classes and created codependency between the rich and the poor. Like any complicated economic system, there were advantages and disadvantages. Understanding the fundamental concepts, benefits, and drawbacks of feudalism can provide insight into humanity's economic and social history. All right. What did that mean? All right, so feudalism, we talked about that. That's the kings, the knights, the nobles, the lords, and the serfs, the people that lived on the land, that were tied to the land. And they drew a clear line in separating the different social classes. The codependency between the rich and the poor. That means the rich needed the poor, and the poor needed the rich. So unlike any complicated economic system, there were advantages and disadvantages to that. All right, so let's go on to the next here. Let's see. Feudalism defined. We already talked about feudalism. Feudalism was a social and political system practiced in Europe. We know that. We talked about that. And Japan and China during the Middle Ages. It was a mutual agreement between the lord and his subordinates, which are basically the lord and the people who lived on the land. In the middle of the hierarchy were the lord's vassals. I'm going to highlight that a different color just because it's just a different word. Okay. These people were nobility who swore an oath of loyalty to their lord. It was essentially a contract created for mutual benefit. In exchange for some land of protection, the vassals were required to provide a certain amount of military service. This exchange granted security for the vassals and significant financial gains for their lord. At the bottom of the pyramid were the serfs. The serfs were peasants who worked the land and provided surplus goods and taxes to the lord and his vassals. Okay, so we have the serfs right here. And the vassals were the people who provided protection. And they served their lord. And that's basically it. They were the people of nobility who swore to the lord that they would protect the land and provide military service. Okay, so there were advantages, but not for everyone. Advantages, but not for everyone. A general advantage of feudalism was the stability that it brought. Serfs supported the infrastructure, that means the land, the cities, by providing essential goods and services. This, combined with an organized system of protection, helped to maintain a steady balance that kept the kingdom running. Although the system was instrumental for societal order, the true advantages were felt by the lord and his close associates. They enjoyed vast material gain at the expense of the serfs. All right, so let's think about that. So who had gain? The lord. The lord got rich at the expense of the serfs. That means basically the serfs did all the work and the lord made the money because he owned the land. Okay, that makes sense. I understand that. So that was an advantage for the stability of the land, but the serfs were doing all the work, and the Lord was making the money. There were disadvantages for the poor. In a system so divided between rich and poor, the peasants were the ones who felt the disadvantages of feudalism. Because remember, up here we said the lords were getting rich at the expense of the poor. Serfs made subsistence living in which they had to forfeit virtually everything to keep their homes. Compounding that hardship were the often heavy taxes that these individuals had to pay. And the serfs had no rights or independence. The church and the lords were the judge and the jury when it came to legal matters. So what's happening there? They had no rights or independence. The peasants were the ones who felt the disadvantages. The serfs made a living which they had to forfeit everything to keep their homes. They had to forfeit everything to keep their homes, and they had to pay heavy taxes. Well, wait, this doesn't seem right. I mean, these lords are making money, and these serfs are paying all the money and doing all the work. I could see this is not going to last very long. Well, we'll see. Okay, drawbacks that led to the end of this system. Yeah, this system is not working. A variety of social changes and events that led to the eventual decline of feudalism system. With increased trade came centralized growth in towns. So peasants were able to leave their land and pursue their own means of income. So they weren't tied to the land anymore. They were starting to trade things. They were starting to expand beyond their little piece of land. This was certainly an advantage for the peasants, but a disadvantage to the lords, who relied on the peasants for hard work and their own material wealth. The overall drawback here was that the reliance on the land and agriculture was used to determine the economic relationships, and when the reliance shifted to allow the lower classes to gain self-sufficiency, feudalism faded out and it eventually ended. Okay, so basically, let's go back to this. With increased trade, so increased trade helped end feudalism. There was growth in the towns. The peasants were able to leave and get their own means of income, and that was an advantage for them. But the disadvantage to the lords, because the lords relied on the hard work for their own of the peasants. So the overall drawback here was that the reliance on the land and the agriculture was used to determine economic relations, and when that reliance shifted to allow the lower castes to gain self-sufficiency, feudalism faded out and ended. All right, so let's go to the serfs. Wait, let me go back. So, right here. In the second sentence, the article says, let me go to here. Feudalism drew a clear line separating the different social classes and created codependency between the rich and the poor. What does that mean? That means, let me write this a little bit bigger. It means the rich needed the poor, and the poor needed the rich. And what did they need? The rich had the land, put that in parentheses, and the poor had the work. The poor did the work, and the rich had the land. Okay, so in the second paragraph, there's a mention of the Lord's vassals. In your own words, what do you think they were? Well, when I looked back at that, we said the vassals were the ones that provided military protection. At the bottom of the pyramid were the serfs. What are 3 different jobs these people would have? Okay, now I got to go back to the other page. I'm going to look at here. The serfs. Well, look at this. They did the land. They worked the land. They cooked food. Food and services. So let's think about this. Let's do they would work farms. They would build. They would build things, and they would give services. Maybe food of some sort. Why is stability in society important? Hint, this is not answered in the reading. You must think about why these people needed stability in their lives. Well, people have to have food, shelter, and safety to survive. Okay, and in order to have that, you need land. I'm just jotting down some ideas here. You can put this in your own words. You need land. You need something to live in. You need to live. So, why is stability important? If you're just moving around all over the place and there's no stability and there's going to be wars and fighting, it's going to be really hard to live. So you need to have that in your life. You have to have stability. You have to have food, shelter, and safety to survive. Okay? Another thing we need to have is water. We need water too. We need to have things to survive and to live. Stability. If you don't have that, you're just going to be it's going to be really hard to live. Okay, let's go to this one. What did the serfs get from feudalism? So what did they get? I mean, they had to do all the hard work. But you know what they did get? They got a home. They got food. And they had protection from the lord, the vassals. What did the lords get from feudalism? They got labor. Labor to work the land. What is a subsistence living? I don't know. I even said that word wrong when I said it. I would say basically a subsistence living would mean to have a normal I can't say these people were stress free, but like a normal purposeful life. A purposeful living. Like basically we all have this right now. We have shelter, we have school, we have structure in our life, we have protection in our life, so we're basically doing okay. Back in those days, the medieval days, it probably was really hard to survive unless you had some kind of structure. Okay, let's put structure here. You had to have structure in your life. Which of the disadvantages listed for the serfs do you think was the worst? Well, I'll tell you what I thought was that I don't know, maybe that they had to pay the taxes. I mean, we pay taxes now too, but it just seemed like everything went to the lords and they did all the work for the lords. They had to work hard. They had to have hard work for very little. I mean, they had protection. They probably had a little hut, but then there's the king living over there, or the noble, the lord, and living in his, his kingdom. We had to keep working for him. So that could be that's your own idea. So how did the growth of the towns hurt feudalisms? Explain one way it hurt the lords. Well, the main thing, how did it hurt, was people started to branch out, and they started to not need the Lord or the land anymore. They started to make their own living, and they didn't need the protection. They started to get their own protections. So if you are a serf, let's look at this question. You are a serf, a peasant farmer. You have been given land by a lord in exchange for quite a bit of the food you produce. Okay, but you get by. Would you have the courage to leave your farm and move to the city to try to become more than just a serf in the big wild city? What do you think you would do? So you've been given land by the Lord in exchange for quite a bit of food that you produce. But you get by. What would you have the courage to leave that farm and move to the city? What do you think you would do? Stay on the land or move to the city? Well, back in those days, people probably stayed because they had security. They had land that they could live off of. Okay, if they go in the big city, they might not have that security. If you went to the city, though, if you left, you might have more freedom and a chance to make it on your own. But that's a chance, not a guarantee. I don't know. That's something, I don't know. I've never been in that position to be a serf back in the medieval times, so I don't know what I would do. But, think about it and just kind of jot down your answers for that. Now, just know that I went through these problems here, or these questions, and I gave you ideas. These are not like complete sentences. You need to come up with your own thinking on this, but I gave you some ideas, and hopefully that helps. So, good luck. Okay. And Mr. Dawson explains this way better than I do. Maybe he'll explain this to you guys in a lesson. Okay, thanks. Bye.